Hey, it's Dean Legge from Dog Post, making you a smarter Georgia fan. What would you think if Georgia and the Gators played the world's largest cocktail party at night each year? What about moving the Tech game to Thanksgiving or Black Friday or even to start the season off? Would that bother you? How about Tennessee, Georgia at night? What about Alabama, Georgia at night? What about pretty much every big game Georgia plays at night? Would that be something that you'd be interested in? Because stuff like that's on the way. A lot of reporting since December from Sports Business Journal, who's really led on this story about the SEC's agreement with CBS probably coming to an end here in a few years, and that Disney, which owns ABC, ESPN, and the SEC Network and beyond, would take over the contractual rights for what's called Tier 1 Tier 1 football rights. So right now, CBS pays $55 million a year total to the SEC for the rights to broadcast games each week. There's only one primetime game allowed per season. This past year, that was Georgia Notre Dame. A lot of the years before that, it's been Alabama LSU. This coming year, it's probably going to be Georgia Alabama, but we'll just have to see. And in the time that we've grown accustomed to this 23-year agreement with CBS and the Southeastern Conference, the SEC has certainly zoomed to the top with the Big Ten in terms of money and exposure. But what's going to happen now that CBS has reportedly pulled out of the negotiations with the SEC is that Disney, the owner of ABC, ESPN, and beyond, is really looking like they're at the forefront. So what does that mean at the end of the day? It means there are going to be a lot more games on at night. So if the SEC's contract goes exclusively with ABC, Disney, and so forth, right now only one broadcast game a week can be shown of SEC home games. So Georgia plays anyone at home. Alabama, Southern Cal, Georgia Tech. If it's a home game, CBS controls that home game. It cannot be at night unless it's the one designated game like Georgia Notre Dame was last year. But what's going on is that TV networks are saying, hey, we're going to pay you all this money. And Disney's going to pay the SEC upwards of $300 million a year, which is a substantial raise, 6 times or more of the $55 million that the SEC is getting right now. So that means Georgia's take from the Tier 1 rights is going to go up 6 times. So rather than making 40-something million in rights, and not all of that 40 million is our Tier 1 rights. That's a portion of them are Tier 1 rights. Instead of making whatever the number is, 55 divided by 14, which would be, not 44 million, but if that goes up 6-fold, that could be another $30 million per SEC school or beyond. We don't know how high that will really be, and I'm really wanting to do the math, but I'm recording this with my phone, so I can't just stop and do it. But the important thing here is that Georgia, Florida, the cocktail party, that certainly could be at night. Auburn, Alabama, that certainly could be at night. Tech, Georgia could certainly be moved or moved to the beginning of the season. Now, for those of y'all who have not really paid attention for a long time or are younger, that game was played on Thanksgiving, certainly in the 90s with Tech and Georgia, and it was played on the 90s on Thanksgiving on ABC. So the difference there now, though, is that there's the NFL on Thursday nights or on Thanksgiving night. So that's a tricky one. But the Friday after has been, taken over by an Arkansas game. For years, Arkansas LSU, but lately Missouri Arkansas, and ABC has seen a bump in the amount of viewers in that Friday ABC window. So if they were to get the games and slide them over from CBS into ABC, you totally could see happening Georgia Tech at 3:30 on Friday rather than at noon, 3:30, or at night on CBS or Disney, whatever it is. These contracts are pretty complicated. The biggest thing too, not the biggest thing, the biggest thing is that these games are all going to be shown in prime time now. Alabama, LSU, almost a certainty to be in prime time. I know Georgia and Florida don't want that game in Jacksonville to be in prime time, and the networks do listen. For instance, Big Ten schools really shy away from playing primetime games in November. Like they don't want it. It's too cold. There's issues. For years, they didn't have lights at some of these stadiums because it's just too cold to play at night in the fall. But TV is paying a chunk here, so they're going to make you do what what they want to do. You're already seeing that with Georgia Auburn and Georgia Tennessee flip-flopping when they play. The other thing that is probably certainly going to happen is that the marquee schools, and you really have at the top two in the SEC over the last 5 years have been Georgia and Bama. Just underneath them was LSU. And right next to LSU is Florida. So basically the big four in television are Bama, Georgia, LSU, and Florida. But the league is paying for, or the networks are paying for Bama, Georgia, LSU. Now I'm getting out of order. Bama, Georgia, Florida, LSU, Auburn, and Tennessee. And the teams they play. But it's those 6 schools that really move the meter. Texas A&M can be like that, but like Mississippi State, South Carolina, I mean, they just don't move the needle. They move the needle when they're playing Georgia. Like South Carolina's number can really go higher if they're playing Georgia. But like they played Clemson last year, and Georgia Tech was a bigger game. So in terms of viewership, so these companies are paying for those. Let's just call it 7 teams. So whereas Texas A&M has gotten used to playing the season opener on a Thursday night, what these teams need to get ready for is, Alabama going to play at Mississippi State. That could be on a Friday night. Georgia at Vanderbilt, Georgia at Kentucky. Maybe not Georgia at Kentucky, but Georgia at Vandy. That definitely could be on a Friday night, and I would think it probably will be in the foreseeable future. And I know from talking with people that have been, obviously I talk to more people at Georgia and the administration at Georgia. I know Georgia. I have a master's degree from Georgia. I've covered Georgia for 20 years, so I know that very well. I know Georgia has no interest in playing on weekdays. Just don't have any interest, period. South Carolina has done it. Auburn has done it. Kentucky has done it. Mississippi State, Vanderbilt. There's been plenty of schools. Texas A&M, Tennessee. They've all played on Thursdays or Fridays lately. Auburn and Alabama did it in 2010. Nick Saban and Bama said, we never want to play this particular game on a Friday again, ever. We don't want to play on weekdays. Georgia, Bama, Florida, LSU are going to do all they can do to not play weekday games. Georgia will basically they will do all they can do to never host a weekday game. And there's logistical issues there, mainly because Sanford Stadium is right in the middle of campus. So that's the main problem there. At South Carolina, off campus, not as big of a deal. At Vanderbilt, smaller campus, they can handle it. Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Bryant Denny is not in the middle of campus, but it may as well be. So, these schools like Clemson, they don't want to host these, weekday games. They really don't. They've done it before. They did it last year. Why? For the ACC network. They basically made them do it. So in the future, Bama, Georgia, Florida, LSU, Auburn has done it before, but these Thursday night games, and I don't think it'll be Thursday night games because of the NFL, but it's going to be Friday night. Georgia plays at Missouri. I know Georgia would do that. I know they would because it would be a night game. They could fly back and get the extra game. They would throw their hands up and really get annoyed with it, and they would try to get something out of it. But that's the sort of game that ESPN would really love to put on a Friday night, or that ABC would. Well, ABC and ESPN are the same company, okay? One is a broadcast network, which is really important. One is a cable company, but they're all under the Disney umbrella. Disney owns all of them. So Georgia at Missouri, that's a pretty big deal game. That's been a Tier 1 game before in the recent past. So that's maybe not a great example, but because of the travel, Florida at Mizzou, could that be a Friday night game? Totally. It totally could be. Carolina at A&M, could that be a Friday night game? Sure. All these things are going to change. And everybody just needs to get used to it and get ready for it. Because when you're cashing a check that's 6 times more than what you were getting, that is a substantial ask to deal with. I mean, you're taking their 6 times more money. You're taking $300 million a year. They're going to make you do stuff that you're maybe not super comfortable with, but you're going to sign the contract and take the money. I will be curious to see if the Big Ten is putting Penn State and Ohio State on Friday and Thursday nights once a year. They've had the contract, Fox, for 3 years. The new Big Ten contract has been for 3 years. And in all 3 of those years, Ohio State has played on a Thursday night, then Penn State played on a Thursday night, and then Ohio State played on a Friday night. Now, there's no bigger brand in college football in terms of television than Ohio State. Ohio State and Alabama are neck and neck. If Ohio State's having to do it, everybody else will too. Dean Legge from Dog Post, making you a smarter fan. Make sure you click to subscribe. Make sure you see some more videos. Thank you for watching. We will see you soon.